All right, it is noon, so we will go ahead and get started. My name is Amelia Belmonte. If you guys have been on my webinars before, I do some of the complimentary monthly ones as well. Originally was going to be Kara Ayala today, but I'm taking over for her today. So topic remains the same. We are still going to do fad diets, kind of walk through what some of the popular ones are, what we tend to see on social media, and kind of go through what we know from a nutrition standpoint, professional nutrition standpoint, and how is this going to be a sustainable pathway for someone in regards to weight loss, and kind of what are the potential cons of some of these fad diets. So as mentioned, my name is Amelia Belmonte. I am one of the corporate wellness dietitians with Arch Amenities Group. So getting started, we've got trend versus truth. So what's really happening in real life versus what we're seeing the media portray diets and fat loss as. Fad diets definitely glamorize the process of weight loss and just kind of health and wellness in general, and often do not tell the full story. In this day and age, we have social media where we see life only behind the camera and as saved videos and pictures. People can say or make you believe anything they want in a 20-second clip. So really, when we're looking at fad diets, we want to make sure that we're seeking out the whole truth with bold, underline, evidence-based research, always. Deciding if a trend is worth your time, energy, or money requires doing some research and looking at some of those evidence-based sources surrounding that topic. These sources will give that scientific evidence if some of these trends actually yield results that also don't cause adverse effects. Along with reading the right research, we need to know our source and the authors of these sources. We should be looking for qualified individuals, meaning someone who is a registered dietitian, certified health coach, or someone who has been in the work, who has had the experience working in the wellness industry and has been trained on the human body. If we're unsure who the author is it a reputable website? Usually those sources are going to be .org or .edu types of sources. And then lastly here, I think, and most importantly, are they trying to sell you a product? Do they get a cut from selling certain products or services? Have you researched the products yourself? Are they claiming to have some sort of biohack that nobody else can coach you through, that no other product or food can do for you except for this product? Hint is, it's probably not going to yield what you think it will. So this is just kind of a good quick checklist to ask ourselves before diving headfirst into a new diet or a new trend that we see plastered over social media. So fact or fiction, do fad diets work? Well, the answer, as with most nutrition things, is it depends. We almost always see an initial weight loss after following fad diets. So if your goal was to lose 10 pounds in 1 month, and then you don't really care what happens after that, then, by all means, go for it. However, that's not most of our goals, right? We want to see some more of that sustainable lifestyle, healthier habits sort of change, not something that is 0 to 100 that will not last a long time. So fad diets are typically not the long-term solution because they are super low calorie or require the removal of a certain food group. So for example, with keto, which we will go into in a few slides again, whenever anyone asks what my opinion is, my first question to them back is, do you like carbs? And the answer is usually, oh my God, yes, that's why I can't have them. I have to completely take it out. But then we have to ask ourselves, how is that going to be sustainable and lifelong, right? We're talking longevity here. How is that going to be lifelong for someone? The absence of carbs will only intensify our cravings, leading to a binge and uncontrollable relationship with carbs later on. And then kind of going back to my original point with initial weight loss, and this in parentheses here, including muscle loss. Some of that initial weight loss, that short-term weight loss, will include muscle mass. Muscle takes a lot of energy and calories to maintain. So at rest, if we have more muscle mass, we will require more calories throughout the day. So we can think of that as kind of our faster metabolism. We have a little bit more flexibility in our calorie intake during the day when we have more muscle mass on us because we are burning more at rest. So we're thinking the opposite. If we are losing muscle mass or we have more fat mass on our body, then we are not burning as much at rest. So we want to avoid the short-term initial weight loss that we see with these fad diets. So the research, there's plenty of research surrounding this topic, some of which suggests that our body, when we drastically cut calories, and I'm not talking just, 300, 400 calories, I'm talking like upwards of 600, 700, 800 calories per day. Our bodies are not sure if this is intentional or not, which makes us hold on to calories a little bit differently, hold on to nutrients a little bit differently, so that in the future, if this happens again, if this kind of starvation happens again, we're preserving our fat stores for these longer periods of lower calories. And we go through, and as that restriction continues, or as we go through periods of intense restriction followed by normal eating, then we are really confusing our bodies and our metabolism of how we should hang on and burn certain nutrients. This could also explain the weight regain phenomena that tends to happen after participating in a fad diet, where we lose some weight and then after the diet is no longer sustainable, we regain that weight plus a few extra pounds, repeating that cycle over many times, and we end up typically heavier than we were when we started dieting in the first place. So this is kind of the gist of that, of what's happening when we diet or severely restrict calories or a food group. We deprive ourselves of nutrients, calories, our favorite foods, our favorite flavors, textures, all of these things. So much so that it triggers huge cravings that we can't continue, and then we end up giving in. We give in so much that we can't control ourselves, and then we feel overly stuffed and guilty, and thus going back to the starting line of starting some restriction over again. Now, this cycle can happen within the first couple of days of dieting, especially if this is new to you. You don't typically embark on diets, but you're just kind of seeing what it's like. Maybe this will happen in the first couple of days of dieting where, you're kind of shocking your system, or it could happen several weeks down the road where you're seeing success, and then all of a sudden you are just getting to that deprivation, you're getting to that cravings point, and then we're getting to this part of the cycle here. One thing that I personally noticed in my own kind of diet cycle many years ago is that I couldn't control myself around peanut butter. Peanut butter was like my vice. I could not control myself around it. It tasted so good to me at the end of the day that I couldn't stop eating it. So half a jar later, probably 600, 700 potentially calories later, I felt horrible because I would just go to peanut butter at the end of the day. And this would happen most days out of the week until I realized that I had been not eating enough throughout the day, that my body was looking for the calories by bedtime. So now kind of seeing if I spread my calories out a bit more throughout the day, having more consistent eating patterns, having balanced meals throughout the day, I can actually last through a jar of peanut butter for longer than a week. So, it kind of depends. You tend to see certain cravings for certain foods, and, our bodies are really asking for those calories at the end of the day. And if we are severely restricting ourselves, we tend to see it at that point. So these are some examples of fad diets that you might see, magazines, online, social media, and we'll walk through some of these a little bit more in depth. But these are typically what I tend to see, or, what I hear people talking about, though this is definitely not an exhaustive list. There are new diet trends every single day being added to this roster. So starting with the keto diet, as mentioned, we would return to this topic. So the keto diet is essentially Atkins amplified, high fat, low carb, and was originally designed and researched. So it's a very heavily researched diet, and it is used therapeutically for individuals with epilepsy. To this day, it is still a prescribed diet in a clinical setting for people with epilepsy to decrease their the amount of seizures that they have. And it continues to be researched in the context of other neurological disorders as well. And there's a lot of research continuing to come out about what some of the benefits of the keto diet, specifically related to the brain and neurological disorders, might have. So that's actually a really cool thing about the keto diet, is that we can use it clinically, therapeutically. So it is essentially high fat, 80% of our total calories, with moderate protein, about 15% of our total calories throughout the day, and then very low carb with less than 5% or less of our total calories per day. So this is compared to our standard nutrition recommendations of fat being around 20 to 35, protein 10 to 35, and then carbohydrates, which in a standard normal diet that we tend to recommend would be bulk of our calories coming from carbohydrates at 45 to 65% of our daily intake. So metabolically, what's happening is when we have less carbs, that leads to a decreased amount of insulin in our bodies. Insulin is released from the pancreas in response to glucose molecules in the blood. Glucose molecules are carbohydrates broken down and absorbed. So this results to then fat being released from our cells because we don't have glucose circulating in our blood as much. We need something to create energy. So then with an increased amount of fat molecules in our blood, we take those fat molecules and we convert them into a molecule called a ketone body that is then used for energy instead of glucose. So we have two forms of ways that we can have energy to do our daily life, right? Walking around the apartment, going to the office, doing normal things. We need energy for all of these things. Our body's preferred way to get that energy is through carbohydrates, through glucose molecules. However, we can create energy using ketone bodies from fat molecules. So pros to the keto diet. It can promote weight loss, definitely. It has been shown to lower blood sugar and potentially increase insulin sensitivity in diabetics. However, I really want to emphasize in diabetics. So if you are someone who suffers from type 1 or type 2 diabetes, it has been shown, the keto diet, to increase that insulin sensitivity in those that are diagnosed with this condition. If you are a non-diabetic person and you think that you need to stabilize your blood sugar and do all of these trends to stabilize your blood sugar, your body is stabilizing your blood sugar for you. There are things that we can eat on a normal balanced meal that can help to prevent high spikes throughout the day that causes like the energy peak and crash. However, that is kind of a different conversation. So I really want to emphasize here, in diabetics, known to promote insulin sensitivity and lower blood sugar. And then, of course, the potential brain health benefits, as I mentioned earlier. There's still being research done on further neurological benefits, like how we see with the decreased seizure activity. Cons, however, we see a bit more. So most of the studies on keto in terms of general health and weight loss are short-term and small, very small sample sizes in the studies. So that is not enough to make standard recommendations on this diet. Also, without enough carbs, our exercise abilities may change or intensity could decrease, leading to reduced muscle mass. So kind of going back to that point of maintaining muscle mass and trying to have more muscle mass to burn more at rest, we want to avoid reducing our muscle mass. The reason that this happens is because, again, our bodies prefer carbohydrates, especially in times of being an active individual. We really thrive off of glucose molecules during activity. The conversion of ketone bodies to usable energy is a much longer pathway than just using glucose right away. So we get kind of a lag in an energy boost from ketones. We also would experience the keto flu. you know, while it doesn't last too long, that might not be a huge con for someone. It's not really that enjoyable. And then with the reduction of carbs, we are essentially taking fiber out of our diet. High fiber sources in our diet are going to be our fruits, veggies, although we can kind of have some leeway with veggies in the keto diet. Also whole grains, right? We're omitting basically the entire whole grain, starchy carb food group. So we're taking fiber essentially out of our diet, also increasing high fat foods and protein foods, which slow down our digestion. That combo, less fiber, more high fat foods, is the two factors in causing constipation. And then we could see some deficiencies in nutrients and the potential of having some adverse health effects on our cholesterol, especially if doing keto long-term and increasing the intake of high saturated fat foods. Now, enough on keto. Moving on to paleo. So the paleo diet consists of mostly fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, lean meat, and fish, the types of foods that cavemen could eat and find by hunting and gathering. So foods that are avoided include our grains, legumes, potatoes, processed foods, and refined sugars. With any diet, it could promote, of course, short-term weight loss. And it is great that this diet emphasizes an increased intake of fruit and vegetables, but long-term effects are unknown. Again, we don't have a lot of research surrounding the paleo diet. Overall, kind of just a helpful way to eat. Definitely, you know, fruits and veggies, nuts and seeds, great. Lean meats, awesome. But one thing to note is that while we are getting some fiber from fruits and veggies, we're still omitting the whole grains and legumes from our diet, which provide a different form of fiber, mostly insoluble fiber. So we've got two forms of fiber, our soluble and our insoluble fiber. We need both of them, a little bit of both, on our day-to-day diet to ensure healthy digestion, promoting some a good gut bacteria health, and also for healthy bowel movements. So while we do get some from fruits and veggies, we are going to not be getting as much of our insoluble fiber from the whole grains and legumes area of our diet. Got a couple of chats, so I'm just going to open up the chat box. Okay, yes, we will have access to the slide deck later, and I will answer this question at the end of the presentation. Okay, juice cleanse. So juice cleanses usually severely restrict food intake. So this is typically 1 to 3 days. I've seen some going as long as a week, where you essentially don't eat anything. You're not really chewing anything. It is like a cleanse where you drink a juice instead of eating a meal. I've also seen some where maybe you have a juice for breakfast and lunch, and then dinner, you're allotted like some sort of soup or like heavier smoothie sort of thing. My main issue about cleanses as a dietitian are the health claims like detoxing and the potential for weight loss. So detoxing is something that our bodies do all day, every day, and that is due to the fact that we have kidneys and a liver. These organs do a lot of important things, including filtering our blood and removing waste either via urine with our kidneys or feces that is helped with the liver. So what is actually happening in a juice cleanse is that you lose a couple of pounds due to water weight and the severe calorie restriction for that week-long few-day period. It is definitely not a fat loss that's occurring. Juices have a really high sugar content. It takes out mostly all of the fiber of whatever fruit or veggie is being juiced, and we are left with the very concentrated carbohydrates and sugars from those fruits and veggies. High sugar content drinks and foods pull water into the GI tract, which makes us need to use the bathroom immediately. So juice cleanses, unfortunately, while they are very refreshing and very tasty, you know, I love to enjoy a juice here and there, not as a cleanse, but just as something to drink. It is essentially expensive food. So something to think about when trying to embark on some sort of cleanse. Our bodies detox themselves via kidneys and our liver. And it will likely yield to that initial few pound, maybe even up to 7 or 8 pounds in a week sort of loss, because we're drawing all of the water into our GI and we are eliminating it. So as mentioned, liver, kidneys, big takeaway on juice cleanses and detoxifying. Thank God we have those organs. They're very important and they do a lot for that detoxifying process. Now onto intermittent fasting. So in this diet, we are focusing more on when to eat rather than what to eat, where we create a daily calorie deficit by restricting the eating hours, essentially. Or maybe we create a weekly calorie deficit by having 2 days, 2 or 3 days maybe out of the week, where you just eat very low calorie and then you eat normally the other days of the week, so that it creates that weekly deficit. Some pros of intermittent fasting is that it can be a bit easier to follow. There aren't super strict food rules, and this diet doesn't really recommend omitting any food groups. So in that sense, I kind of like it. You can it's like a all foods fit type of approach. However, it just doesn't do a really good job of promoting just general consuming of general healthy foods. And it doesn't really provide like a nutrition framework of, how to build your plate during those hours and what foods to really focus on, high fiber, healthy fats, things like that. So I think there's some misses in this diet, although it does kind of have a refreshing philosophy of not super restrictive, all foods fit. We're just kind of moving around the time slots of when we're eating a little bit. One thing that I will say about intermittent fasting is it really, really causes us to disregard our natural hunger cues. So just like how my first question with keto is, do you like carbs? My first question with intermittent fasting is, do you eat when you're hungry? And a lot of people say, I just kind of ignore it until my eating window starts at 1 o'clock or 2 p.m. But I get really, really hungry around 10, but if I chug some water, then it's fine, or, whatever it is. And I really do not promote not listening to that initial hunger of the day. It's really beneficial to just kind of kickstart our eating times to have a little bit more balanced meals, but also consistent eating schedule throughout the entire day. We fast when we go to bed, essentially. Some other cons, so, not promoting consumption of healthy foods, all of that. We don't have a lot of long-term evidence to support that it really is beneficial for sustainable weight loss or any of that. And it's really not appropriate for someone who, we say athletes here, but even someone that's just very active in general. Let's say you like to work 5 days out of your work week, or you go to the gym 5 to 6 to 7 days out of the week in the mornings, and that's your fasting window. So you fast through all of that and you work out in the morning. Intermittent fasting does not really support a very active lifestyle because we are just burning through calories throughout the day, and we need to make sure that we're eating enough to support that. The alkaline diet. So this was made famous by good old Tom Brady. The alkaline diet is based on the idea of eating or drinking foods that claim to regulate our pH or decrease acidity. So the body actually very, very, very tightly regulates our pH scale, essentially, of our bodily fluids, of our blood, everything. It is an extremely tightly regulated process in our body. In fact, if there was an issue with the pH inside of our body on either end of the spectrum, either too alkaline or too acidic, it would literally be a medical emergency. We learned this to become a dietitian as part of our like clinical route. If someone's body pH is off, it is like code red, all hands on deck, medical emergency. So it is very unlikely that the foods that we're eating make these internal pH changes. Overall, the alkaline diet just kind of promotes more fruits and vegetables and legumes, which is great. That is an awesome, just kind of general healthy rule of thumb, versus thinking of it in terms of omitting certain foods because it is going to alter our body's pH. That is very highly unlikely. Okay, last diet we'll cover here is the gluten-free diet. So gluten is a protein found in wheat, rye, barley. So we see it in foods like bread, cereal, pasta, some grains, beer, but is also in sneaky ingredients like, or is also a sneaky ingredient like lunch meats, processed sauces, random store-bought things. You might see barley as an ingredient, and that's going to be a source of gluten. So just kind of watching out for things like that. A gluten-free diet is absolutely necessary for someone who has celiac disease, which is a genetic autoimmune disease. Their bodies essentially do not produce the enzyme to break down the protein, and their bodies attack the gluten, which damages the small intestine, leaving a lot of pain in some people, and long term is just not a great way to treat the small intestine. So for someone who has this condition, eating a gluten-free diet is definitely necessary. Now, there is kind of a spectrum of sensitivity with gluten. People can definitely be sensitive to gluten where there are similar symptoms to celiac disease. There's kind of a long list of symptoms that we could possibly see. However, there is not going to be the same intestinal damage long-term for those who are gluten sensitive. And essentially, so with any enzyme, so we have an enzyme that breaks down the gluten protein. With any enzyme, if our bodies can produce it, we produce it on an as-needed basis. So if we cut out gluten for a long time, thinking that we're sensitive to it, our bodies will not be used to creating that enzyme anymore, making it harder for us to digest if we reintroduce it in bits or if we have it accidentally. So, thinking, oh, I'm so sensitive to gluten, I'm just going to cut it all out, except for Saturdays when I want to have X, Y, and Z. Well, Saturday night leading into Sunday, you will absolutely not feel good because we haven't been producing that enzyme enough to break down all of the gluten that we just had. Thus kind of putting us back in that cycle of, oh, I definitely can't have any more gluten anymore. Let's restrict it. Let's cut it out completely. Now, the thing with a gluten-free diet is a lot of the times when we go from eating gluten-containing products to gluten-free, we might be omitting some ingredients like breads and things like that. And instead of eating those, we are instead eating more fruits, more vegetables, more kind of healthful foods that we would be more high volume, less calorie, thus creating that calorie deficit is what I'm getting at. So not that the gluten-containing foods aren't healthy for us, but we might just be making some swaps of ingredients that are just naturally going to be less in calories, that would create that calorie deficit, thus leading to maybe some weight loss with that. But bottom line, non-celiac eaters, gluten is going to be 100% fine for us. We're not going to see that long-term kind of structural damage to our small intestine as will someone with celiac disease see. Another thing to keep in mind, gluten-free products tend to have added fats and sugars to make up for the lost texture that gluten gives products. So again, not the end of the world, but something to make sure that we're continuing to read nutrition labels, ingredient labels, to see where are these sources of added fats and sugars coming from. Is it worth it to have that gluten-free product versus the gluten-containing product just because it has the gluten-free label on it? Which leads me to this point: just because it's gluten-free does not mean that it's healthier. I have the same views on vegan alternatives. Just because it's vegan doesn't mean it's healthier. Although there are some cases where it might be, but more often than not, a vegan donut versus a non-vegan donut doesn't make one more healthy than the other. So this infographic is just pretty good to kind of point out that fad diets succeed in one thing, and that is usually in creating a calorie deficit. So unfortunately, that is often, depending on the diet, too restrictive to be sustainable in the long term. But we see here, keto diet, we're omitting all of these foods, so we're creating a calorie deficit. Intermittent fasting, we are restricting the time that we're eating, so we are creating a calorie deficit. But at the end of the day, are we going to do intermittent fasting every single day for the rest of our lives? Does that feel good for us? If the answer is no to any of that, then that's likely not going to be the sustainable route for us. So a very, very extremely simplified version of what weight loss looks like. How to lose 1 pound of fat: we need to create a 3,500 calorie deficit on a weekly basis. That breaks down to about a 500 daily calorie deficit. Subtracting 500 calories from our food is actually quite a lot and could feel like quite a lot, and we would likely notice that hunger pretty quickly. So thinking about what other things that we could focus on: increasing movement, eating more high volume, low calorie foods to feel fuller on fewer calories, working on building some strength and muscle to burn more calories at rest, kind of compounding, maybe a slight calorie deficit with some other tactics to create that deficit for us. And of course, instead of adopting a restrictive fad diet, looking at our current nutrition routine and how we build our plates and portion sizes that you currently use is always a good place to start before jumping headfirst into a super restrictive diet. More often than not, we just need a few tweaks here and there. The My Plate is always a great resource to revisit. I use it all the time working one-on-one with clients. I use it all the time in nutrition education webinars like this. It's just really basic, but good to remember. So essentially, we want half of our plate to contain fruits and or vegetables, a quarter of our plate of whole grains or starchy carbohydrates, and then the last quarter belonging to some sort of protein source. So keeping those basics in mind, along with portion sizes and these kind of standard ways to visualize a portion size, and just kind of looking at what your current habits are and assessing that, getting your kind of baseline before making any huge adjustments is really important. So kind of walking down through this line here, 1 handful should be about the portion size for vegetables, a fist of whole grains, as well as fruits, a palm's worth of protein, and then 1 thumb of fat. That does not seem like a lot, and that's because it's not. Fats are more calorically dense than our carbohydrates and our proteins. So a little bit goes a long way with our fats. So depending on your individual recommendations, you may require a bit more than all of these standard, 1 serving of this, of these standard recommendations, or you might require a little bit less. It just all kind of depends. And that takes into account your current height to weight ratio, your activity level, how well you sleep, your stress level. All of these factors play a role in not only how you fuel yourself, but also how your individual hunger levels are throughout the day. Again, therefore, you could need a bit more or a bit less than the standard recommendations. So that kind of goes to show that This is why I really emphasized weight loss simplified, because there are a lot of, yes, this is like essentially what you need to do to lose a pound of fat, but there are a lot of things that go into the equation, a lot of factors that go into the equation that impact, how hungry we feel, how we react to certain foods, how we're able to recover throughout the day based on how well we slept. There's all of these factors that play a role into it. So wrapping up here, just to touch on what Arch Amenities can do for you, the things that we provide and offer from the nutrition team. So we have virtual nutrition consultations, meal plans, but also on the fitness side, we've got one-on-one fitness training, small group training, group exercise classes, all of these things to kind of help out. So if there are any questions, I know I bypassed a couple of them already, so I'll go back to the questions that were answered previously. If anyone has any questions, I'll be staying on here for a few more minutes answering. If something comes to mind later on, jot down my email address. You can absolutely email me continuing this conversation, or if you're interested in any of the offerings, the nutrition offerings, please feel free to reach out. So again, my name is Amelia Belmonte, and I'm one of the corporate dietitians with Arch Amenities Group. How can we better support, encourage friends and family who seem to be locked in cycles with fad diets? Yeah, this is a great question. I think just having the, being a good support system and just encouraging balance in people's lives. So having whoever is maybe stuck in these cycles, providing some good, maybe other sources of social media, finding other like good accounts and websites and articles for people to follow, introducing or offering to have more balanced meals and snacks with that person. Let's say if this is your a good friend of yours or a family member, offering to eat more with them and having, encouraging more of a balanced meal. But, and I know that might not go as long of a way with just having one person encourage that, but I think really at the root of all of these trends and diets in general is going to be social media. So I think improving the media influence on that person in general, sending accounts and articles and things like that, that might just improve their overall picture of what healthful lifestyle, sustainable weight loss can look like for someone. Yeah, any tips on how to break a sweet tooth habit? Example, eating dessert after dinner. Yeah, so I tend to see, again, kind of like with my peanut butter example with myself, if I am not eating enough throughout the day, I need something after dinner. And that still happens to me to this day. I mean, we all get busy. We all have things going on at every single hour of the day until 5, 6, 7 p.m. sometimes. So yes, it is definitely, we see this all the time of needing something sweet, needing something to kind of end your day, cap the day. Trying to have consistent meals and snacks throughout the day, even if it's just one extra snack in the afternoon that you can have before dinner, or in that kind of 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. window, even if it is something sweet or sweeter, having that more consistent spread out calorie distribution in general. If that's something you already do and you like having something sweet, find a way to work it into your normal calorie intake. If it's something that you think that is impacting if you are on a weight loss journey, or if you just think that it's not a healthful part of your intake, then maybe we need to reassess what healthful actually means. Health definitely means including fun foods here and there. So, if it's a lot of something every single meal after dinner, maybe we cut back a lot to half of that. And then maybe the next step is cutting back 7 days a week to 5, thinking of small things here and there, but still allowing yourself to have something, I think, is a really key point in just general healthy intake, and enjoying our foods, right? I don't think that that's inherently a bad thing, that you crave something sweet after dinner. What are some items I can keep in my desk at work? Yeah, anything shelf stable will be great. Individual packs of popcorn or crackers, whole grain crackers. There's some like tuna packets and, turkey jerky. What else is shelf stable? Granola bars are good as long as it's not a glorified candy bar sort of thing. Those are always good. Packets of roasted edamame, packets of mixed nuts and fruits. Whole fruit, keep that, maybe, make sure you're checking on it so it doesn't rot in your drawer, but some good whole fruit sources. Oranges can be kept for quite a bit. Apples, things like that. Dried fruits. Really, anytime that I'm recommending like a snack, things to keep in at work or something, making sure that we're pairing 2 food groups together. So let's say we're pairing a carb and a fat, or a carb and a protein, some sort of pairing like that. That helps to really not overeat in one food group or the other. It helps with creating that satiation. So let's say we get popcorn and an apple, crackers and cheese, some sort of pairing like that can really help to help with satiation for snack times. Okay, all, for those who are still on, I'm going to go ahead and close the meeting. Thank you all for joining today.